Hi, thank you so much for participating in this activity today. My name is Elytra McCann and I'm going to be your teaching artist for this project. For today, we are going to make a watercolor penguin paper collage. So we'll do a watercolor background and then we'll make our penguin and its little iceberg home, and then at the end we can make some accessories to keep it nice and warm in the winter. So while we are working together today, just keep in mind that maybe watercolor's new to you, totally fine. If maybe something doesn't work out right away, give it another shot. Watercolors are very easy to work with and they're very easy to blend. So be very kind to yourself and we are gonna have a really great time. All right, so we have all of our supplies together, and the first thing we want to pull out is our white sheet of paper. Now, if you feel it, it should be a little bit stiffer. It's not like the paper you see in maybe a printer. It definitely is a little stiffer, and that's because with watercolors, if you use too thin of a paper, they can warp or tear easily. So that's why we have this special watercolor paper. And then the first thing we want to do is make some background for our penguin. So we're not going to start off the background. We're going to start off with our watercolor. And we want to do some wax resist, create some layers. And so for that, we're going to find our white piece of paper and our white crayon. And in the background, you can draw as many or as few snowflakes as you would like. So I have an example. We'll see this later, but this will be the background that I used today. And I just drew in some very simple snowflakes. You can make yours more intricate, more of a design, as big or as little as you want, okay? So I'm gonna draw in some snowflakes, take my time. They're kind of like, if you were to draw like stars in a sky. They don't need to be too intricate, but they add a little bit of something in the background. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been kind of putting mine near the border because when we make our penguin, that's going to be right in the middle of our page. So if we put a snowflake, if I put this snowflake right here, then we're not going to see anything. Okay, so I'm going to finish doing this, and then we will work on our next step. All right, so I finished putting in my snowflakes. Maybe I need to wipe off a couple little waxy bits. If you see that, feel free to wipe those off. The next thing we are going to want is to do our watercolor because that takes a little bit of time to dry. So we need our little watercolor palette, our cup of water, and then a paintbrush. Now, these paintbrushes that you have, they're pretty small. So it's going to take you some time to fill up the paper. Don't feel like you need to rush. If maybe you've done some painting before and you have a bigger paintbrush, this one's about 1 inch. See kind of the difference? You are welcome to use this, but I wouldn't use something like this. This is maybe a little more flimsy. These are going to work really well for our background. So I'm going to use this big one just so I can show you a little bit quicker. For those of you who haven't done watercolor before, watercolor, part of its name, right? We definitely need water. So I'm going to grab some water from my water cup, and I'm going to choose what colors I want to use today. So for this example, I went with more of a sunset or a sunrise kind of vibe, and this one I feel like is a little softer and a little more wintry. And I think I'm going to kind of go for a mix. So I always like to use a little bit of red. Really, I kind of like to use all the colors. And I know I'm going to use some yellow. Oh, and you see, kind of mixed them up a little bit, totally fine. When you paint them, they're going to be blending them anyway, so it's not a big deal. And then yellow mixes with green really well. So I'll get some of that, and I think we'll do blue and purple. Now you can choose whatever, as many or as little colors you want. Maybe you want to do all red, but you kind of do some very bright red and some softer red. or blue, so it's more like a night sky or something. All right. And then the next step is we are just going to fill up our white sheet of paper as much as we can. We don't want to leave any white behind. And while we're doing this, you want to have, if you want to do this step, it's optional, but have some salt on hand. That'll give us some texture in the background that also looks like snowflakes farther away. This one's a little harder to tell because I put them on a little bit later. But if you put it on right away, you'll get some very big particles. And that's because the salt is repelling the watercolor. All right, so, oh, and if you just get some fresh water if yours gets really dirty. But I'm gonna start with blue, because I like that one. And for me, I'm gonna start right here, because I know I want blue kind of on the horizon, kind of like there's some water maybe. And if, let's say you put down your color and you're like, wow, this is too much. I didn't want it to be that bright. Just use a little bit of water and you can lighten it up. Do you see how that lightens it up a little bit? It's not so bold. I kind of like bold colors, but to each their own. Paint in your stripe. And if your paper, do you see how it's kind of warping a little bit? Just hold it down. I tend to work from one area to the other, and then I'll fill this in once that's dry. All right, I'm gonna do some blue, or sorry, some green, because I know green mixes with blue. So let's say I was mixing colors and I mixed orange next to my blue. If any of you have mixed colors before, you might know that orange and blue actually make brown. So that maybe you want that, but I'm not really a big fan of that. I want some very bright, vibrant colors for mine. So I'm gonna think about how do colors mix and what are they gonna look like when they overlap? So I've got some blue and green. Green also goes very well with yellow because yellow and blue make green. So I'm gonna grab some yellow. I'm gonna fill in the rest of the top of my paper. We can see, I'm just gonna keep putting on, brushing it until I like the blend of those colors together. And while that's still wet, sprinkling some of my salt on there. The blue is probably dried by now and I won't be able to get too much, but maybe I want to try. Still a little bit of yellow on there. I'll add a little bit more blue to my paintbrush because I really want some more snowflakes. All right, that should be pretty good. I'm not going to put salt on any more of my paper, just so that way it's not quite so messy. And I need to do the bottom. So blue goes well with purple. So I'm gonna grab some purple. I think purple's probably my favorite color, just because I really like red and I really like blue. So purple's kind of a good mix. Oh, and we haven't even talked about our snowflakes. So that wax that we put on, that crayon that are made out of wax, they repel the water. And so when that happens, it shows that white that's underneath those crayons. All right, I'm finishing this up and then I'm going to set it aside to dry. All right, so now I kind of wiped up my work area because there was some salt everywhere and there was some wet paint and I didn't want that to get on their next step. But the next step is to make our penguin. So for that, we're gonna need our black paper, white paper, and our yellow paper. We'll start with the black, so if you wanna grab that first. And I'm gonna have this one right here next to me for a side comparison for you guys. Also, we're done with our water, so you can set that aside, dump it down your sink, whatever you need to do with that, or you can just wait to clean it up at the end. So we've got our paper here, our black paper, and we're gonna need a scissors because we're gonna cut out the shape of our penguin. So you wanna think about what size you want, right? So our paper, you know, it's quite a big piece of paper, so we can make a pretty big penguin. But if maybe you really liked your background and you want some more of your background to show, that's totally cool. So you can make it a little smaller than my penguin here, but I wouldn't go too much smaller because you still want it to fill up a large amount of space. All right, so I don't need all this, so I'm actually going to cut my piece of paper in half. Set that aside. That's about the right size, right? Great. And then how we're going to make this is, if you notice, we have a straight edge on the bottom, and then it's just a big U, or a big arch, right? If we flip this upside down, it's a U. So if you want to, you can use your white colored pencil to draw on here. You can also just cut it out if you feel pretty confident. I'm gonna draw it just so you guys can see. I'm gonna go, it doesn't need to be perfect, it's just a little estimate. All right, so that's about how big I'm gonna go. Hopefully you can see that all right. And then I'm gonna cut it out. All right, so when I drew mine, I kind of had a wonky top, so I just cut it into a shape that I liked better. But here's my little penguin body. So that part is done. And the next step is making its penguin belly, that white part, okay? So you're gonna grab your white piece of paper that you have. Really, any piece of paper is gonna work for you. We don't need a thick piece like we did for the watercolor. And for this, I'm gonna look at the size of the black body part, and I don't wanna make that the same size, right? Because if we were to make it the same size and it filled up, then we wouldn't have the space for the face. So maybe you even wanna see about how big it is. So that's about how big it is. I think I'm gonna go right about there. That should be pretty good. If we look at the size there, that'll still give them a nice big belly. And then you're gonna cut that out too. Take your time cutting too. We wanna have a pretty nice round curve. All right, so once you have that cut out, I suggest that you place it on your black piece of paper for the black body and see if you like how it looks. I feel pretty good about that. Maybe I'll put it a little higher up today. That way his little feet can stick out versus having it way at the bottom. So kind of think about where you're gonna want that. And we're not gonna glue anything down until we're 100% ready to do all of it. That way we only have to glue a couple times. So next we want to make our flippers. Let's do everything that we have for the black paper. Now these flippers you can make however you'd like. They're the penguin's little arms, right? So I kind of cut a curvy triangle out because their flippers kind of, you know, curve out, but then they come to a point. So looking, my scraps aren't very good, so I'll grab that other sheet that I had. And a little trick that you can do for when you need something that's similar, if you want them to be the same, is you can take your piece of paper that you have and fold it in half, or just layer, you don't have to fold it in half, but if you have two pieces of the same color paper, and now you have 2 layers of paper that you can cut at one time. So again, if you want, you can draw out if you have a very distinct flipper idea in your head. I don't really, I'm gonna cut something pretty similar to what I did before. So I'm just gonna cut straight up, and that'll be one side, and then a curve. All right, do we see that? So we have 2 flippers. And now I'm gonna think about where I want them. That's kind of what I did before. I had them facing up, but I was thinking later that I think their flippers actually kind of face down, and I like that a little bit better. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. I like the size. Check to make sure you like the size of yours. If you don't, if you think, oh, those are too big, trim them down, totally fine. If you wanna make, you know, you could, maybe this penguin has one going up, one going down, and you wanna aim for them to be about in the center of their body, about in the middle, right? We don't want their flippers way up there because then they're gonna look like ears. And down here, they might look like feet or a tail. So right in the middle of their body, towards the top of the white tummy area. All right, so we've got that down. Next, I think we could either do the eyes or the yellow part. I think let's do the eyes. That way those ones are done too. So I'm grabbing my paper that I used before. I'm just gonna cut off a small part because eyes aren't very big. And again, I need two similar shape sizes. So I'm just gonna fold it over. And here, I think I'm actually gonna draw what size eyes I want, because last time I drew them kind of small. Let's see. Yeah, I like that size a little bit better. They'll be kind of big and kind of funny looking, and I like them. Sometimes it's kind of hard to cut out circles, so if they don't come out perfect, not a big deal at all. All right, so now we have two circles. Something I should bring up. So this one, perfectly clean, because I didn't draw on that piece of paper, right? This one I drew on, so I have the black marks from the crayon. Flip it over. As long as it's clean on the other side, you're good to go. So there are my eyes for my penguin. But if you notice, these ones have a little black circle in the middle, so I'm gonna add my black circle to my eyes. Now that can be as big as you want or as small as you want, and they could be looking to the left or they could be looking at the right. Maybe they're looking at the fish in the water, because penguins dive for fish in like under glaciers and things. So I'm gonna do them, I think, pretty big. I think that's pretty cute. Kind of reminds me of like a puppy dog. Let's see. Yeah, I like that. So I'm gonna aim for a similar sized circle. Draw it out. All right, gotta wipe off a little bit of that wax. All right, so there's our little penguin eyes. Next, we finally get to do the fun little beak and the feet. So you need your yellow piece of paper for that. I have a very big piece of paper. Again, I don't need all of this, so I'm just gonna cut off a little section. That way I'm not working with too much paper. Sometimes that can be a little frustrating. And right away, I'm just gonna cut out the beak, because it's a very simple triangle, right? It can be as wide as you'd like. Maybe I'll cut out a couple of different beak shapes. So kind of just a pointy one. That's pretty cute. Maybe a short, wider one might look good. Oh, I really like that one. That one's pretty cute. If you want to, you could even go around, if you're good with the scissors, now be very safe and careful. You could cut off the little corners. So maybe, I think that looks pretty cute. So I think I'm gonna do that one. And then with the rest of my paper, again, we're making similar shapes. So I'm gonna fold this over. Got a little wrinkle in my paper, but that's not a big deal. Grab my black crayon. And now we need to do their webbed feet, right? So they don't just have like toes like we do. They have kind of pointy toes, and then there's webbing in between. So what I like to do is draw, make sure you guys can see this. I kind of draw the beginning of a square, okay? And then I make my toe shape from there. So you could do maybe something like that. That would be their little feet. It'll look better once we cut it out. But I like having some different options. So do a little square bottom and a zigzaggy top, and that should give you a pretty good looking penguin foot. I don't know if they have a special name other than webbed feet. I know their little arms are called flippers, so. Now this part might be a little hard to cut out, so just take your time. It might be easier to cut across the top of the toes and then just cut out those areas instead of trying to cut it all as one big piece. All right. Then just be careful of your fingers. You get kind of close. You don't need any of, oops, forgot that wasn't glued down. There we go. So now he has some little, I like to tuck them underneath the body because their feet are tucked under their bellies. All right, so now we have some little webbed feet for them. So there's our finished penguin. The next step would be gluing it on to our paper. So I'm gonna get ready to do that, and you get your penguin situated so you really like the way that they're sitting. Adjust if you need to adjust any of their flippers or their feet, or whatever shapes you may not like. Okay. All right, so it's time to get gluing, but before we can glue our penguin down, we have to make it a little spot to sit so it's not just floating in the air. So we are gonna make a little iceberg for it to sit on, or maybe a big iceberg. If your penguin's kind of small for your piece of paper, here, I'll show you a comparison. That's the size of mine. Maybe yours is, your black piece of paper is a little bit smaller. That's super cute too. But then maybe you want to fill up some more space with an iceberg. All right, so we're going to make our iceberg. And for what you want to do to make that iceberg is we want a place for our penguin to sit. And then we're going to add a little layer because icebergs are pretty thick, right? They're not just a thin sheet of ice. So I'm gonna make what I call a wiggly oval. So we know the basic shape of an oval, but I'm gonna give it kind of a wiggly edge. So there's the top, and here's kind of my oval shape. You see how it's basically an oval, but we have a little bit of a wiggle in the line. And then next, I'm gonna draw one line at this edge, and one line at this edge, those peaks. And then I'm going to draw another wiggly line to connect it. So this line is wiggly because it's kind of as if it's in water, right? So the water wouldn't just cut across. It's going to have waves that are in it. And then if you'd like, you can draw maybe some other lines signifying that there's an edge to your side. So it's not just all the way around and smooth, but that it has some edges. Then you can fill this in with your colored pencil or a blue crayon if you have one, or if you don't have a blue crayon or a blue colored pencil, you can use a very light amount of blue watercolor. I had this pencil on hand, so that's what I'm using. But I'm just gonna fill this in. And then once I'm done, we will cut it out and glue it to our paper. All right, I'm gonna do this. All right, so I am done with my iceberg and I just need to cut it out. So I'm going to cut out edge. And you can leave that edge that you drew, or you can cut it off. Either is fine, whatever you like better. But if you end up cutting it off on accident, maybe, not a big deal either. So here's my little iceberg that he's gonna sit on. And now it is time to get gluing. So you wanna have your iceberg near the bottom, but not all the way, right? We still wanna have, set those aside. We still wanna have some room on the bottom, but I think I like that spot right there. So grab your glue stick, and I'm assuming most of you have used a glue stick, but some tricks with the glue stick to kind of do your edge first, because you really want to make sure you get a lot of the glue there, and then you can fill it in, or I was taught to make an X to hold it down. So I've glued in, laying it down, and then my other tip is, now it kind of, wants to peel up. It's not maybe the most secure. I got a little bit of something on there, but that's not a big deal. So I'm gonna give it a back rub. I'm pushing down on that iceberg and trying to adhere my paper to it the best I can. And we're gonna do that for almost everything with our penguin. So there's our iceberg, ready to go. And now you can, we can set this, well, we'll just glue right on here. So, no, we won't. So the next thing we want to do is grab our penguin and all of their materials, and we want to glue on the belly first. So again, here's a good thing to remember. Is there something on the back? Because you want one good white side and then maybe the dirty side that you drew on to get your shape on the back. So we're gonna go up, glue on those edges, put in our X, not getting glue everywhere, lay it down, push it down, and then if you have a clean surface, give the penguin a little back rub. Take your time with this. Sometimes if you go too quick, you'll pull up an edge and then you'll bend your penguin, but we're gonna glue it down anyway, so we should be able to fix that. There's his belly. Next, I like to do the flippers. So, like I said, I'm gonna have mine facing down this time. Right, I like that spot. So I'm gonna pull them out, make sure I'm gluing on the right side. You only really need to glue the end of it because the tip of their flippers is gonna stick out. All right, flip that over, give its little flippers a little back rub. All right, next I think I'm gonna do the eyes. For eyes, they're kind of tricky because they're so small, but try to get the glue on there the best you can. Sometimes I'll even kind of hold it up and glue it if that's easier. One eye. Two eyes, and before the glue dries, I'm just going to make sure I got them where I want them, and then rub the back. All right, getting pretty close. My beak, you want to glue the entire part of your beak. All right, so we're going to glue on our flippers. And we want to be careful that we're gluing on the right side. So this is the side I want to show. So you actually want to put your glue on your good side. That way, when you slide it underneath, it shows the good side and not the part that has the crayon on it. This side doesn't have anything, so I think I'm gonna glue on this side, like that shape. All right. It's a little bit harder to rub on that part, but there we go. So now we have a fully finished penguin, and we have our background. So now you can think about where you want it to go. And see, my little flippers come out pretty far, but if yours come even off the paper, that's pretty cool too. You're kind of breaking away from the box, but mine come pretty close, so I'm gonna try and get them pretty much in the center. And you want their feet to be somewhere on that iceberg. That's what I did here. Maybe the toes are sticking off a little bit, but if we put them on there, then you can't see the iceberg. And if we put him up here, well, it kind of looks like he's jumping, but then he's not really sitting on his iceberg, right? Sitting on his home. So now we can glue the entire back of our penguin, because the entire thing is going to touch our background. And take your time gluing this part, because this is gonna be the part that maybe, you know, the rest of it's all kind of glued together, but we want to make sure that it stays on the background. Also, make sure that before you glue it, yours is dry. I made this one before, so mine is dry, but you don't want to glue it until yours is dry and you've wiped off some of that salt if you added it. If we try and glue it and it still has the salt on it, it's not going to stick. All right, and then I'm going to give him another back rub. Again, make sure he's nice and stuck to the paper. And there we go. So there we have it. That's basically everything. The very last part is to add the little accessories. Now you can kind of go crazy, but I'll show you a couple of them. If you made a smaller penguin, you might have more room for a hat. I don't have too much room for a hat, so I'm thinking maybe I'll do some little mittens and a scarf. So for that, you should each receive some patterned paper, or if you have some colorful paper at home that you really like and you want to use, go ahead and use that. I'm using a little colorful sheet from a magazine that I had permission to use. I didn't just rip this out, so don't go ripping magazines apart. All right, and I'm going to create some little mittens. So let's see, cut out. You want to cut out something about the size of their flipper. Yeah, this is a good size, looks like. And then what I'm gonna do is you can either cut them out separately, that way you make sure you get a right hand and a left hand. Technically they don't have thumbs, so you could even just put on just another kind of like upside down U shape that would go on their flipper. Or you can give them a little thumb hole like they're wearing a pair of your mittens at home. I think, let's see. I think I'm gonna do a little thumb hole. Maybe not. I'll just do one for their little flipper. So, I'm gonna cut those out. There we have it. So there's maybe one little mitten. I think those are maybe a little big, so I'm gonna give them a little trim. Yeah, that's much better. So I cut off quite a big piece there. It's always better to start with more material. Oops. We will glue that down. Cover the tip of their flipper. Yeah. All right, here we go. He's wearing some little mittens. And then I'm gonna give mine a scarf. So I grabbed some yarn, and if you have some at home you wanna use, feel free. If there's any in your kit, you can use that too. There we go. All right, so, oh, there's the one I was looking for. So I think I'm just gonna do kind of like 2 strands for their scarf. So let's see. What I did for this one is I tied a knot. I'll show you. So you see that knot? What I did was I took my 1 piece of string and I tied the ends together. All right. So it's about the right size. That one was a little short, so I'm going to try a different one. There we go. And then I cut it. See how I have a loop with a little knot? I want that knot to be kind of the bit of the scarf. So I want to cut that part to be about the size or the width of my penguin. Give it a little trim because I don't need all that material. Then if I lay it on there, right, there's one little edge of a scarf, and then I'll do another bit. And this part can be a little tricky because we're using a glue stick. If you have some Elmer's glue, the white glue bottle, it doesn't have to be Elmer's, but a white glue, liquid glue, that's gonna work really well too, but it's a little more messy. So let's get this the right length. Might even trim off a little bit more. And then the hard part is trying to glue down these strings, right? So I think the easiest way to really do that is to just put glue where you want your scarf, and then lay down your yarn. There we go. And your second piece of yarn. And you could do a third piece of yarn if you want it to be a really thick, cozy scarf. But penguins, you know, they don't wear scarves every day. So I think this one's maybe just more of a fashion scarf. All right, so there we have a little penguin with some mittens. I have some little pom-poms and stuff too. So you could add, maybe we'll add a little pink pom-pom to it. I think that will be pretty cute. And that you probably will need maybe some liquid glue for, just to make it stick really well. But have a little penguin. On this one I made some earmuffs. Maybe some of you wear earmuffs instead of a hat or like a headband. And I think the earmuffs are pretty cute, and I used a really thick yarn for that to make a fluffy scarf. And you can really make whatever winter accessories you want for a penguin. You could add maybe some buttons or anything that you have around that you have permission to use, of course. And there you are. So that is the end of our penguin project today, and I just want to say thank you so
much for doing this with me. I hope it made you laugh, because of course a penguin's not going to have mittens or a scarf on. They're able to stay warm just on their own. But I hope you have a really great day or night whenever you're watching this, and thanks again.